So in our vSphere web client, we're going to log in. There we go. And we're in vSphere web client. So from here, we can go up to our little home icon, and look at down here, we see this. IBM Spectrum Protect is right at the home. It's got its own little line item on the list of objects, and that's part of that VMware vSphere extension. And this is where it really gets significantly shinier than it used to be. So I'm going to pick that, and we're going to open it up. We're going to see what we have here. So when you pick, the first step you're going to have is you're going to go in, you're going to pick that Spectrum Protect item, because we need to set up the extension. So essentially the extension needs to know where the old GUI is, where the old VMware backup GUI is. That's this guy here. So he wants to know how to access this interface, and we're going to give him a path to that. So we're going to say setup, and here we see no GUI host connected. So I'm going to pick edit on this object. So it knows about obviously the vCenter that we're running here. But we're going to go in there, we're going to edit it, and it's asking where is that guy? And what is the GUI's SSL port? Remember, we changed that port. So we set mine to 7081. And the GUI is the same box as the Spectrum Protect server, which is TSM server 1. There we go. The web GUI connection, TSM server 1, port 7081 was updated. The configuration update succeeded. So now we're attached to the GUI configuration. So now we have the ability to do some controlling and some manipulation of what's going on in the GUI from within this interface, and that's what we really wanted to see. All right, so we're going to refresh this real quick. I don't think we're going to see any schedules. Yeah. So I just clicked schedules, so we have connections here. Then I jumped over to schedules under this manage section still, and we see the vCenter that we're going to back up, or we're going to look at the backup schedules for, but we don't see any backup schedules. Well, how do we get a backup schedule created? This took me a little bit of time to figure out because it's not real clear in the documentation. But the way you get a backup schedule first created, we can build a schedule and not attach any backup jobs to it, and that's what we're going to start doing. We're going to attach a data mover to it, but we're not going to attach any actual VMs to it, as it were. So the way you do that is you use the Operations Center. So the Operations Center for Spectrum Protect for VMware has a section under Client Schedules where we can build schedules now. And when we do that, we can build our backup schedule. So I'm going to create a backup schedule called Test Schedule. It's going to be attached obviously to server 1. We're going to attach it to the VMware domain though. And what type of application is it, or what kind of backup is it? It's a virtual backup. And the subtype is VMware. It's not Hyper-V. Test schedule. All right, so when we choose this, it's going to say what data center node do we want to back up. And I'm going to say VM data center. That's our data center node that I'm worried about. Now it wants to know when we want to schedule this for. So right now, I'm going to schedule it for, let's say, 15 minutes from now, roughly. And the runtime alert is how long should it wait before it fails, essentially. And I'm going to say 15 minutes after that. If it doesn't run within the first 15 minutes, it'll fail, kind of like the duration parameter. I'm going to hit Add Schedule. We're going to see it do something here. It just created a schedule. Now, where did it create that schedule? It was inside the Spectrum Protect server. So what I want to show you is what it actually did. There's our schedule. I'm going to bring up this window so it's a little easier to see. There's our schedule. So here's the name. It says backup VM. And we see here, all it really essentially did was create a schedule within the VMware domain with this specific option layout. And here's the magic ticket right here. If you remember, the old GUI used to create these same kind of schedules, but under domain.vm full, it would put all the VMs you specifically chose with those checkboxes. Well, it doesn't do that anymore when you use tagging. All you have to have in there is domain.vm full equals schedule tag. And what that means is it's going to use the tagging mechanism within vCenter in order to identify what to be backed up and how to back it up. And it's going to use the incremental forever incremental method. So that's the method you're going to back up. We don't have any objects specifically called out, just these options. And there we go, he's set for 15 minutes from now. But there's no client objects associated with this. Now how do we look to see what's associated with this? Because from within the Spectrum Protect server, we already have a job, it's scheduled, and it's assigned. Actually, it's not assigned. I forgot. So we have a schedule created, but we have no nodes associated. What nodes should we see? The nodes we should see are our data mover nodes, or our one data mover node. So we go back here and we look at schedules and hit refresh. Now that we created that schedule within Op Center, we now get a test schedule. Here's our test schedule. Here's our start time every day. The data center is data center. And you'll notice we can edit this guy. So I'm going to edit him. And there we get a list of data movers. So it figures out what data movers exist associated with that specific data center. So we have a data center here that's specifically called out. So it looks for data movers associated with that. We only have one currently. But we hit that check mark and say, OK, we've now associated a data mover to a test schedule from within this GUI. Now when we pick him, we'll see down here under Data Mover, VM Data Center Data Mover. So we're configured. And there, see, we even see the option pulled from the backup schedule. And if we were to run back here and open up our command builder again, and I were to, no, we don't want to do that. Let's use the GUI, or let's use the green screen because that's easier to see. Right there. Now we have an association, VM Data Center Data Mover. But we still don't see any VMs. No VMs have been associated from the point of view of the Spectrum Protect server. We need to associate some VMs. So how are we going to do that? To do that, we're going to start to use tags. So let's take a look at how the tags work. From the main menu here, we can choose tags and custom attributes. And we'll see under tags, we have all these tags associated. And we'll get this to slide over. We can see they're all Spectrum Protect related. You may have more tags other than these, but these are the tags that were set up when we did the installation and that web extension was added. All right, so we see there's a VM Data Center Data Mover tag here. And I think that must have gotten created because I did not make that. That was there after our installation. And then we also have categories for different types of tags as well, but we won't need to modify that. So this VM Data Center Data Mover tag exists, which means we can attach that to something else. What we don't have listed here is a schedule. What we do want is a schedule tag. So we need to create a schedule tag, and we also need to create a domain tag. And we're going to go through and we're going to set those up. It just takes a few seconds. So our new tag is going to be, let me step back so you can see what I did because I kind of went fast there. We have a data center tag, or a data mover tag, and it's named VM Data Center Data Mover, the same name as our data mover. That's important. This tag name should be the same as the data mover name. And that's how it's associated to the data mover specifically. We're going to create two more tags. One that's going to be the domain, the management class. That tag is going to be the management class tag. and then we're also going to specify a schedule tag. So I'm going to start with the schedule tag. So I click on this little icon here. It says new tag. I'm going to hit that, and it asks what category I'd like to use. Those are the categories that appeared in the other section of this page. We see a lot of different categories to choose. I'm going to pick the one that says schedule. So the schedule, and then I need to name the tag the same name as the schedule I created. They have to match exactly. So what was that schedule name that we created? It was right. Here we go. There it is. Test schedule. That's the name of that schedule. So we're going to call this test schedule. Test backup schedule. You say OK, and now that tag exists called test schedule. We're going to make one more, and that one's going to be the management class. Now remember our management classes. All we have is standard. So that's what we're going to call. We're going to call the standard management class. So that's going to be called standard. So I've made 3 tags. Each one calls a specific function from within Spectrum Protect. We have the management class, the schedule, and the VM data center data mover. Now you saw in there there's some additional tags, some other categories. We have application protection tag for the case where we have Microsoft SQL or Exchange. We want to attach application protection to those guys so that that functionality is enabled. We have backup management. We have data mover, which we already know of. Disk backup list if we're backing up specific disks, but not all of them. We have snapshot attempts if we want to do something other than the default. So those are different choices that we have. What we're going to be playing with here is just the basic configuration, which is just the data mover, the schedule, and the domain. Now, how do we attach these tags? Now, the tags behave as you would hope they would behave. If you go to your main window here within vSphere web client, we see I don't have any very complex layout here, but we can attach tags to pretty much anything a tag can be bound to within VMware. So let's say you have folders here, you have different ways you've prioritized these nodes. You can add some depth to it. I don't have any very complex depth, but the rule of thumb is basically that you want to attach your tags to the highest point in the structure in the tree as possible for the most default configuration, and then you want to drill down and customize as necessary as you drill further in. So I'll give you an example here. We have a whole bunch of nodes here that we could potentially back up. There's a couple of these I don't want to back up. I don't want to back up my vCenter appliance. I don't want to back up my other Spectrum Protect server, my Protect replica. So my secondary copy, my replica server, is running as a virtual machine here. But these other nodes are fine. The test nodes are relatively small. The Ceph nodes are small. They don't take up very much space. Templates are normal size. So what we want to do is at the data center level, we right click and we can choose tags and custom attributes. We can choose to assign a tag. So here we go. We see our list of tags, and we can choose to attach a data mover. And there it is. It shows up right in the tags list, and you can actually assign from here as well, as you see. You don't have to right-click and choose tags. You can just say assign there. And now you notice the data mover is no longer listed. We now have test schedule. Once you attach a data mover, a schedule, or a domain, any additional tags that exist in that category will no longer appear. Say assign, and then we go back in here and I'm going to choose the management class. We're going to assign that as well. Now all 3 of these guys are assigned to the data center object, which means that everything underneath that should inherit those properties. Now if you go down here and you look at one of these guys, we won't see those tags actually attached. So how do we know whether or not our propagation is working properly? Now there's the million-dollar question. In order to see whether or not this is working, if you right-click on an object, you go down here and you see there's this item called All IBM Data Protection Actions. We go in there and choose Manage Data Protection. It's going to pull this nice window up, and I like this. This looks really good. We see this window walks us through all the different parameters that are set up. So we see we have an exclude from backup. No. So that means it's not going to be excluded. You could choose yes, but we're going to leave it at no. The schedule has been detected through the tags. Test schedule. There it is. Repeat every day. The data retention policy is specified right there. Coming from data center, 30 days or 3 versions. That's my policy. And the data mover, now see where we don't have the data mover specified, so there's something not right with my tag. I must have spelled something wrong. VM data center DM. Let's go back in and look at that tag. I'm going to delete that tag and recreate it. That one was already there and I didn't expect to see it. That's right, it said data mover, it should say data center. That's the problem. There we go. Now we're going to go back to hosts and clusters. I'm going to go back to data center. I'm going to go to tags and custom attributes again. And choose VM data center data mover. Now that we have the right name for that. So there, that's attached. We see all 3 of them are attached now. Now let's go back and look at Ceph1 again. All data protection actions, manage data protection. And now our data mover is set properly. There it is. Disk protection is all disks. Data consistency is always application consistent, so that's going to use the application consistency. Application protection is disabled though. Exclude from backup says no. So we have this set up to back up everything essentially here now. Now we again don't want to back up everything, and we only have about 5 minutes left before we run out of time here. And our backup kicks off. So what we want to do is we want to modify these guys that we don't want to back up, protect replica, and my vCenter appliance. I'm going to right click on these guys, go to tags and custom attributes, and I'm going to give them a specific tag. That tag I'm going to give them is the excluded option. So under backup management, we have an option to choose excluded. So what that means is the object is excluded from scheduled backups. I'm going to say excluded. I'm going to say assign. And now, if we look at protect replica, he's excluded. He has a specific object attached as a tag. We go to any of these other guys, they're all empty. See that? They're blank. Now we want to do the same thing to the vCenter server. We're going to pick the vCenter server, and I'm going to add this tag from this window. There we go. Again, excluded. I'm excluding the whole VM from backup. So now if we were to look at one of these guys in that same little check window, data protection actions, manage data protection, we're looking at the protect replica, and now the exclude from backup option is set to yes. So we've made that change. Let's say we want to exclude this 2012 guy. I've not done this before, but I'm going to try it right now live on the video to see if this can be changed from here. Exclude, yes. Okay. And let's see what that does for us. Look at that, it added that tag for you by changing that parameter. So that window is controlling the tags right there. So we go into test WinTooth K3. We can choose to assign an exclusion there. And so now, essentially, our 2 test Windows boxes, our protect replica and our vCenter server are all disabled from the backup. We have these three guys set to back up. We have these three guys to set to back up, and we have this one box called Test Backup VM set to back up, which I think actually is a sizable box. Yeah, 40 gig of data. All right, so we have a couple minutes here. We can see what happens when the backup kicks off. We're going to see our tasks kick off down here. And that's what I want to demonstrate for you guys. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to go back to the main menu under Spectrum Protect, and we can see that there's some more information about how to get all this set up. You can find that under Task Overview. You can look at some of the system requirements and some of the details of how this works. There's our test schedule. We can see our data mover and what object is detected as being protected. The test schedule, data center is the object that's picked. We can fast forward through this to see the backup actually kick off. And there we go. So here we can see the log file, the DSM-SCAD log file from the data mover. I had to resolve my time oversight that we're running 11 p.m. and I was putting 11 a.m. in my time. We see the backup running against Windows XP template, one of my old templates. That's going to run for a while. We're at 12%, 16% right there. And we see even the transport method is mentioned. So NBDSSL is the protocol being used. While that transfer happens, I can mention that the NBDSSL protocol is used when sending backups over the network. That essentially means that a VM kernel process has to handle the network transport, and that burden falls to the shoulders of the ESX host. So if you do not use SAN attached or hot add based backups, the I/O will run through the ESX server itself, and the network interfaces that are managing the VM kernel will handle that data transport, and you'll see all that data flow through there. If you want that data to be routed through one of your VM networks and use hot add, you'll need your data mover to exist as a VM, and that will be the first mechanism that will attempt to be used. It should be successful, I should say. If you want to use SAN, which is obviously the optimal one, basically all you have to do is build a physical data mover box, and that physical box has to have allocated to it all of the same VMFS volumes, all of the storage allocated to it, presented to it over the storage area network. If it can see that, then the APIs within the data mover will automatically attempt to use the SAN attachment. It's going to identify those volumes by their unique IDs and then open them read-only on that data mover box, whether it's Windows or Linux. It will perform a read-only operation against those volumes directly over the storage network. And that can be the most optimal way to handle performance, but there is the bit of a challenge of having to have all your volumes presented to that box as well. That's going to be managed by it. So we're about 50% here. I may fast forward some of this. So in the event that you want to do a restore, your restoration methods are similar to what they were before. If you right-click on a VM and you go under Data Protection Options, there is an option to be able to restore a specific VM from right within the VM interface. And we can see some of our choices here. We have an available backup. I just picked, I think this was test VM 1. And we see an available backup at 4:36 today that we could restore from. We can choose all these various details. We can choose to create a new machine, replace the virtual machine. We can choose a restore, an instant restore, and an instant access. So these instant restore, instant accesses, instant access provides access to the backup, but does not actually write it back down out to the store. The only thing that's written to the store is any changes once instant access is created, because the backup data obviously can't be written to for changes. Instant restore is the instant access front end with the restore process running in the back end. This is generally the fastest way to get your box back up. You hit instant access, instant restore, and the instant you execute it, essentially your VM is available. When you start running a boot, the VM will, the objects that are needed for boot will be the first things that are requested from the restore just to get the box back up. And as data flows back, the box will boot up. Full restore obviously is just restore the object in a off quiesced state. So we're going to choose that, and I'm going to do a restore to a alternate virtual machine name. We're going to create a new virtual machine. We're going to put it on the .55 server up here, right next to where the existing one is. I'm going to restore all available disks in the VM configuration. I want to know what storage I'm going to use. I'm going to pick ESX2 local 7, which is some local disk attached to that specific box. And what data mover do we want to use? I would pick this data mover. Now here's a perfect example right now of why multiple data movers may be something you're interested in. If a data mover is performing a backup operation, you're going to be forced to sit there and wait for that backup operation to complete before this restoration can occur, because there are no available data movers. This restore will schedule, and it'll sit there waiting to execute with this guy hogging the data mover. So we would be best served to have an additional data mover to perform those restorations. Here's the summary. We hit finish, and the restoration would begin. You could also perform your restoration. You can see our backup here is about done. I'm going to switch over to the other screen after this goes to the next step. So now we see he's running against Cepho3. Cepho3 is actually going to run really fast. Yep, because he's very small. I think he's an empty VM essentially. CentOS v7 template ran quickly as well because that was already backed up. We can see that the backups were basically picked up from where they left off. So even though our backup objects were from a different installation of VMware, our Spectrum Protect for VMware, we were able to restore, we were able to pick up those backups, and these backups are just rambling along now. This should essentially be done in a few moments here. If you notice, never more than one VM is running here, and that's because we chose the defaults for our backup scheduling and our multiple VM options within the data mover. If we wanted to run more of these in parallel, we would simply have adjusted that parameter inside the data mover to something larger than the default. You could also adjust that option via an option set from within the Spectrum Protect server. If you had all your data movers assigned a common option set, it would make the change to all data centers, all data movers, excuse me. And I believe that's it. I believe the backups are complete at this point. So we could come back to here And again, we can still use the backup schedules over here. I don't think the schedules are adjustable from this point of view once you've created them from within the GUI. You pick that guy, you can delete it. I think you can, no, you can't even look at properties. Look at that. Schedule contains unsupported options, so it can't be edited. So this interface doesn't allow for making edits to that given data mover. Now the beauty of the way this was set up, one of the nice things that this is set up is that this old interface continues to work. So you can create the old schedule, or an example of an upgrade from version 7 to 8, and you didn't want to delete the schedules as I did. The old schedules would still exist out here, and they would continue to function as they always have, associated with existing data movers. Now, as you converted your data movers over to tagging based, the data movers that you either add or convert would no longer be able to support the schedules that may have been associated with them. If you add them, obviously that would be the best way to handle it, and you could leave your existing scheduling in place as you brought tagging online. So the two configurations can coexist. And restores are possible from here, as they were before as well. You can choose to go through this interface to find your restorations. So if we look at Ceph01, I think that was the one we were looking at before. We should see that same backup object that we could restore. Here we see our 3 versions that we can pick from. Must not have been Ceph01, must have been a different one. It was test VMWare. There, we have those 2 backups available to us. And there's 3 restore points available in Ceph03. So let's go back to here and let's look at Ceph03 and see what we have available to us for restoration. I want to see if we see 3 objects. There's our 3 objects for Ceph03 on the 8th. And let's go through and let's actually run this restoration. So Ceph03 is on 59. We're going to leave that on 59. We're going to create a Ceph03 with a date and timestamp on it as the virtual machine we're restoring. All objects. We're going to put that content on ESX local 1. There's plenty of space there. We're going to use the data mover and say finish. And that will have been scheduled as a CLI job. So an important point I can make here for you, when you execute jobs immediately from within either the vCenter interface here or from within the Spectrum Protect web interface for restoration and backup, this interface right here, the CLI commands execute via a direct communication from the web GUI to the data mover. But a scheduled command actually creates the schedule on the Spectrum Protect server, and then the data mover is sitting there waiting for the server to tell him what to do. So the way the data flows, the way the command is executed is slightly different. They show up a little different. For example, if you query for events on the Spectrum Protect server and the command that was executed was a CLI-based command, so it was an immediate command run from the GUI or from the web client for vSphere, your ability to view those events will be not there. You'll have to use this interface to review those events. So under reports, we can look at real quick backup status. We can see coverage for all VMs. We should see our existing coverage. We have our restored VM that was detected already, not backed up obviously, and the Protect replica, our 2012 box has not been backed up yet, and then our server appliance, which has been excluded all this time. So these guys have all been kept care of, and those are still tracked, even though this is a fresh install. And I think under recent tasks, we should see the process that's running right now. Yeah, there's our full restore that's running. We can see that 886 megabytes have already been restored of the however big that VM was. If we go back to vSphere web client, we can also see that we're restoring that guy. We're at 4%. And that's about it. I didn't show additional data movers, but another layer, and I guess I'll walk through that real quick. Another layer of functionality that's added that will be useful as an environment gets big, or if you have a large environment, is the ability to attach multiple data movers to a specific backup job. So let's say we have this schedule called test schedule. We choose edit. Remember, we were in here at one point. Oops, there we go. We were here at one point, and we just see this one data mover. But if we had, let's say, 3 or 4 data movers configured, so we had gone through the exercise and set up another one called, let's say, what I had before was VM01. You could check all of these data movers, or let's say maybe a small group of them. Let's say you had 10, and you could choose 3. And those 3 would service that schedule. Once you did that, when the schedule executed, those 3 data movers would round robin share all of the backup workload across all of those data movers now, or all of those VMs that were associated with this schedule. So if that schedule was right at the root base of your VM tree and you had, let's say, 10 data movers, you would be balancing automatically across all of the different data movers, all of these restoration jobs, backup jobs. And that would provide some automated balancing, some automated evening out of the VMs. Now, if you choose this button here, full rebalance of data movers, when you click that, what essentially is going to happen is that all these data movers that are associated in this list will be balanced using various calculations against what all the VMs are that are detected that would execute against this schedule. And so once you hit that rebalance and you say OK, what will happen back under VMs, so if you were to look at a VM, there'll be a tag here for a specific data mover attached to a specific VM, telling you that this specific VM is going to be handled by this data mover. And it only gets reassigned if you check that box again and go back in there, and when that reassign process happens, all those tags get juggled. So that might be useful as your environment grows and you need to make sure that everything's happening smoothly. You can hit the rebalance button, or you can be more selective and assign data movers based on other criteria that make sense to you, either through the tree or through some specific criteria. Let's say maybe test machines or templates. You may want to have all of those specifically going through a data mover that exists in a specific location, perhaps, if you're just, your environment is spread across multiple sites. Well, that's about all I had to show. I wanted to walk through all those tags, make sure everybody kind of understood the process of how tagging worked, the different functionality. I didn't get into a lot of the depth, but there are some other videos out there about how you can play with tagging to help manage how things are routed. But this gives you the basics, shows you how to get schedules working, and all the fundamentals of using vSphere as your focus for setting up your VM backups with Spectrum Protect for VE. I hope you guys found this useful. I apologize if it was a little slow or a little meandering, but hopefully it was enlightening. I didn't see any other videos on YouTube that covered this, so I thought it might be useful to provide some folks some insight as to what I figured out playing with all this in my lab here over the past couple of weeks. Thanks very much, and I welcome any comments you guys might want to add in the bottom. I'll do my best to answer them. If you have any questions, or if you have anything that I said wrong, please make sure you correct me. I'm sure you will, so that we can be as accurate as possible as to how this functionality works. All right, I guess signing off.